Are you currently in the market to buy a house and have questions about the appraisal process? What happens when the appraisal comes back less than the purchase price? What happens when you waive the appraisal, maybe because you're going above the asking price against multiple offers, and the appraisal comes in less in that scenario? How do you get an appraisal waiver in this market, and how many appraisals are actually coming in at value in this market with home prices going well above the asking price? These are all questions that we're going to address in today's video. My name is Jeb Smith. I'm a real estate broker here in Southern California. My channel is all about real estate, so do me a favor and hit that subscribe button if you want to stay updated and be guided through the real estate process. So the first question we're going to address today is one that I get quite often, and that is, what happens when I make an offer on a property, we get an appraisal, and the appraisal comes back less than the purchase price? Now, in this scenario, we're going to assume that you still have your appraisal contingency in place. You haven't waived any contingencies. Now, that contingency actually gives you the ability that if a property doesn't appraise, allows you to back out, not lose your earnest money deposits. Now, in this scenario, we're going to use a purchase price of $500,000, but we're going to assume that the appraisal came in at $475, just for our conversation here. So there's that $25,000 disparity between the appraised value and the purchase price. So you have a couple of different options in this case. The very first option would be to go back to the seller and try to renegotiate, try to get them to lower the price down to $475 to meet that appraised value so that you can move forward with the loan. That's option one. Option two is that you go back to your lender, have your lender talk to the appraisal management company to try to use different comparables to try to come up with comparables that will make that value be there, if you will. Try to renegotiate that value with the appraiser. And thirdly is that you come in with the difference, right? You make up the difference between what that house appraised for and what it's worth. In that case, it would be $25,000. So you're basically coming in with that. You're not coming in with $25,000 because it's based off the amount that you're actually financing, but we're just going to say $25,000 to round it up. So that would be that option. Now, you could back out of that contract, assuming you had that contingency in place, at least here in the state of California, and not lose your escrow deposit. So if it didn't appraise, you have that contingency in place, you can back out, move forward, no issues. But what happens in option two, where you decide to waive that appraisal contingency? Right now, we're in a very competitive market. A lot of home buyers are waiving the appraisal contingency in order to compete with other home buyers. In fact, a lot of listing agents, a lot of agents out there are requesting that the appraisal be removed just because they have so many offers, and there are buyers removing it up front. So what happens in the scenario where you waive that appraisal contingency and the value comes in less? We're going to use the same numbers for this case. We're going to say that your offer was $500,000 and that property appraised for $475. So in this scenario, you've waived that appraisal contingency, so you can't use the appraisal to back out of the contract. So you're in a position where you have to make up that difference. You have to make up that $25,000 difference, or the amount that that you financed of that $25,000 in order to move forward. Now, you might ask, well, what happens if I just want to back out of the contract and not move forward because the appraisal comes in? You can't do it because you waived the appraisal contingency up front. If you use the appraisal and say you're backing out for the appraisal, essentially the seller could say that you violated the contract and potentially keep your earnest money, your escrow deposit. So that is the issue. Now, you might be able to back out for other reasons in the contract, the home inspection. You might be able to back out because the loan. There are other, alternative contingencies that you might be able to use to back out, but you can't use the appraisal in that scenario. And you might say, well, what about just waiving the appraisal up front and we use something else to back out? You could potentially do that. It's not exactly ethical. It's not ethical at all, in fact. And if the seller presses you on that, and they say, hey, no, your loan still was able to get approved, and we were willing to do everything that you wanted with regards to repairs and what have you, and they know you're using the appraisal to back out because they know it came in less, then that's going to be a battle between both the buyer and the seller in that scenario, and probably not going to be good for the buyer in the case that you've waived your appraisal contingency. So it's not smart in this market to waive appraisals unless you think that the property could actually appraise. Now, I've been fortunate with my clients that we haven't had an appraisal issue in this market as of yet, right? So everything is appraised at what it should be. So we haven't had any clients coming in with less money. And in fact, when my clients are putting in offers on property, we're going through the comparables. We're saying, hey, look, I think it could appraise based on these comparables and what have you. So we're trying to make sense of the numbers before writing an offer. We're not just writing numbers so far out there just to get our offer accepted. We're trying to make sense of the offer that we're writing, because we don't want, my clients don't want to have to come in with a bunch of extra money to make up the difference. In fact, some of them don't have the extra money to make up the difference. So they're not in a position to come in with all of this money up front. So we're trying to do our legwork by looking at the comparables, seeing how fast the market is moving, how much is it adjusting month over month, talking to agents that have properties in escrow to find out where they went into escrow to see what new comps will be out there that we'll be able to use for the appraisal, to help justify it. And so, keep in mind, you shouldn't be waiving appraisals unless you have the difference in that cash to be able to make up that difference. Now, another common question I get is, how do you get an appraisal waiver in this market? An appraisal waiver is issued either by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, and it allows you to purchase a home where they waive the appraisal. Now, this is done by property address. It's property address specific. There's no way to know beforehand without putting in the actual property address whether or not you're going to get it. But in order to even be considered for it, the loan amount has to be under $1 million. You have to have at least 20% down, and you have to have really high credit scores. And now what they do from that point is you put in the property address, and they run it against their database. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they both have proprietary databases that they don't share with anyone. And this is from appraisals that they've done, either on refinances or purchases, and they use some algorithms to determine whether or not the value, the price that someone's offering on that property is realistic and can avoid an appraisal. And if it does, in some cases, they'll get the appraisal waiver. But it's not something you'll know without entering that address specifically to know whether or not it will qualify based on that scenario. So it's not something you can really count on. And lastly, what are we seeing with regards to, properties appraising when homeowners are offering or buyers are offering well above the asking price? As I mentioned a moment ago, I've been fortunate that my clients, that my properties have appraised, but I've talked to my lender here locally. I've talked to a lender in Northern California. I've done surveys on YouTube, and it's about 50-50. About 50% of people are having appraisal issues in this market, 50% aren't. I haven't had any, fortunately. My lender has had some. The agent I spoke to, or the mortgage professional I spoke to in Northern California, said he's had some, but even when they've come in less, they haven't come in way less. People are offering quite a bit more than the asking price, and the appraisals are coming in higher than that purchase price, but they're not coming in at the full purchase price in some cases. So there are definitely appraisal issues out there, and so you just need to make sure you do your homework up front, make sure you're working with a professional real estate agent that can guide you through that process, let you know, the drawbacks of waiving that appraisal contingency, do doing that legwork up front when making your offer to see whether or not what you're offering is realistic, and having that conversation of what happens if it doesn't come in, what the potential downfalls could be, because that is super important, especially in this market. But I'd love to hear your feedback. If you're buying a house right now, if you've been through the process, what have you seen? Maybe you're putting in offers on properties. Are you waiving the appraisal contingency? I'm interested to know. As always, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your support, and hope to see you again soon. Have a great day. Bye-bye.